welcome to All Talk TV. The show is called Gila Guests, and I have two wonderful guests with me today. We have James Pasternak. He's the Toronto City Councillor for Ward 10, which is York Centre, and as well a longtime supporter of James, political activist, somebody involved in our community, Shugar. And we're going to be talking about a few different things, but I want to first mention that James was the previous school trustee for the Toronto District School Board.
That's right.
And he's not afraid to get his feet wet on certain issues that are new to him and to address some controversial topics as well. One of them is the Afrocentric schools, that James was a big supporter, that we should give it a try. It didn't cost a lot of money. There was a half-empty school, and he was really the advocate for it. I don't think that Afrocentric school would have happened without James. So welcome, James. And
pleasure to be here.
And today we're going to talk about something else that's a little bit controversial that you're involved in.
Well, certainly we have a lot of things going on at City Hall, but the context and currency of our anti-discrimination policy is getting a lot of buzz.
Well, the reason it's getting all this buzz is because of the Gay Pride Parade. And we're not here to talk about the Gay Pride Parade per se. We're here to talk about the fact that the group QAIA, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, is engaging in what we see as discrimination against supporters of Israel. We see it as something that's anti-democratic. Would you say it discriminates against some taxpayers in the City of Toronto if the city is funding?
Well, I mean, the Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid is an international group that picks that phraseology for really one purpose, and it is the purpose to demonize, to delegitimize Israel, and to bully Israel and its supporters. It is not meant to create a constructive, positive dialogue about the Palestinian-Israeli question. It is really to target and intimidate.
When we talk about Israel and we talk about comparing it to South Africa, it's quite false. I mean, this is complete political rhetoric. There's just no truth to it, and it's upsetting. It's upsetting for people who sympathize with Israel, who understand that Israel has a right to defend itself, that Arabs and Israelis within Israel, there are no laws discriminating against either. Whereas in South Africa there were laws, and in fact in Jordan, I believe, Palestinians are legally discriminated against, whereas in Israel, Israeli Arabs are not. And it's interesting how people can twist the truth and tell only part of the story.
Yeah, this analogy between white-ruled South Africa and the apartheid regime and modern-day Israel as one and the same is totally preposterous. Anyone who has visited either the Palestinian territories and Israel, which I have, or lived in South Africa, would totally dispute that analogy. It is just an attempt to smear Israel as a racist regime. There's 1.5 million Palestinians who have elected to take Israeli citizenship. There's Palestinians on the Supreme Court, in the Knesset. They vote. It is not a perfect country, but no country is. But it is highly respectful of the Palestinian population, much more than many of the Arab neighbors.
Then there's the flip side that I want to address to Robin. The flip side is that they are using the vehicle of the Gay Pride Parade, which is, if it wasn't so sad, it would be funny. We all kind of say that because, Robin, you've been to Israel. Are there gay rights in Israel?
I mean, Israel is a haven for the gay community. In fact, people from all over the world journey to Israel for their own Gay Pride Parade, which is probably one of the most the largest Gay Pride Parade in the world, and
it just took place in Tel Aviv a couple of weeks ago.
It did, and so, but what I wanted to say was that really, when you're looking at the overall issue here, the issue is about discrimination, about the city's role in funding an organization that is using city property and city funds to put on a supposedly community-oriented event. And I don't think we should get mired down into the details of arguing for and against whether Israel is an apartheid state. I mean, this whole, the whole mandate of that group ultimately is to malign and marginalize Israel and hence the Jews. It's a new form of anti-Semitism. But really what the issue for City Council is, and for for Councillor Pasternak, is to come up with a broader-based policy that will cover all sorts of future potential problems like this that may deal with other groups, other hate groups that have nothing to do with Israel. So it's really not we don't want to narrow the issue down to just this. So I was going to turn it back to Councillor Pasternak about that.
So what are you proposing, and what have you proposed then?
Well, a year ago, the City Council at that time asked the city manager to determine whether the term Israeli apartheid violates the city's anti-discrimination policy. In April of this year, we received the astonishing decision that, technically speaking, it does not discriminate the current policy. That's correct, but they used a very high threshold of the criminal code and the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. Inability to, or having not ruled on it, and it was an extremely high threshold. We need a Made in Toronto policy that states clearly the events that we're going to host on our property and fund have to meet a certain community threshold. And if groups want to demonize and target and discriminate against other identifiable groups, they're not welcome.
Well, what's interesting with this year's Gay Pride Parade and with Mayor Rob Ford is that the city doesn't want to fund until after the parade. And what do you think of that? Do you think that's fair to say, yes, we will give you some funding, but we're going to wait?
Well, actually, the reality is we're bound by a motion passed in the spring of 2010. And that clearly stated in the previous council that no funds were to be transferred until after the parade. What happened last year was the Queers Against Israeli Apartheid group said they would not march. The funds were transferred to Pride Parade, and then they changed their minds and ended up marching. And the motion was brought forward to make sure that no funds are transferred till after the parade takes place.
And do you think that that's going to happen now with other city events, or this was just a one-time motion to delay funding until after an event?
Well,
that's quite a precedent.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take a stand now. You know what? If we don't take a stand now and be firm about it with a revised, up-to-date policy, which my motion through City Council expects the city staff and city manager to write, and take a firm stand on funding issues when it comes to groups like Kauai and others, it will open up floodgates where we could have situations in which a wide range of groups are participating at taxpayers' expense on city property, and we could have our hands tied on our attempts to stop them.
Look, this group, Pride Parade, is a fantastic group. The event is making our city a world-renowned city. I'm proud of what they've done. They brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars into the community. They've last year they must have brought in what would you say? Close to. Look, I think it's close to $900,000.
No, they bring in millions.
And we're not talking. Yeah. We're not talking about. Certainly not talking about maligning the group. I mean, the city also funds all sorts of other very worthy causes. They fund the Caravana. They fund the National Ballet of Canada. They fund the TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival. They fund Luminato, and I count the Pride Parade in as part of those, you know, quality events in the city. So I think the idea about withholding funding until after the Pride Parade happens is strictly to ensure that there's no backtracking or backpedaling from the Pride event coordinators in terms of allowing QAIA to march.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that there's no doubt Pride Parade is actually worth tens of millions of dollars to the city, and many other parades offer the same economic spin-off, whether it's the Santa Claus Parade, the St. Patrick's Day Parade, any kind of Memorial Day or a Memorial Parade, Remembrance Day. There's economic spin-offs to that, and the city has a responsibility to support those initiatives, either through in-kind services, which is cleanup and police and community safety, or through grants. So, but we have to have a standard. We have to have a set of rules that everybody has to follow, and unfortunately, the coalition against Israeli apartheid, which actually, when I was on the school board, they tried to lure some of our kids from our high schools into their ideology to get them involved in.
So if the city bans the use of the term Israeli apartheid, which the Ontario legislator did, Peter Sherman, the MPP for Thornhill, which is my riding, put forward a motion that was passed unanimously saying that the province does not support the use of the term Israeli apartheid, and that passed along all party lines. And if the city put forward specific language in its anti-discrimination laws, would that fall towards the Toronto District School Board as well, and not allow any groups to operate or have Israeli apartheid? You know how sometimes they'll do events or Israeli apartheid walls or things like that in schools.
Well, I mean, I would say the Toronto District School Board is actually the leader. They condemned Israeli Apartheid Week and they've banned it from their property,
Well,
and they called it what it is. It's a week of demonization and vilifying. Hurtful, spiteful.
So now we just need the universities to follow suit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would ideally we would have these groups not provided public space. There's not a lot we could do if they want to have their little events in some kind of other private institution and make their own arrangements. Fine, but why the public buildings are offering space? And being embarrassed by these groups, who knows why?
It's very disappointing, but what's going to happen if Queers Against Israeli Apartheid does not march, does not have a float, does not have a visible presence, yet another group, transgendered against Israeli Apartheid, or rainbow group against Israeli Apartheid, say another group takes on the Israeli Apartheid, will the city pass on the funding?
That is going to happen. I mean, from what I've read, through the QAIA website, they are rallying all sorts of groups to purchase their T-shirts, their buttons, wave their flags, carry banners, maligning Israel as an apartheid nation. It's just that they're not going to be walking under the banner of QAIA. So the question we've heard a lot is, what plans does the city have in that eventuality? If after the event, Pride is coming to you and saying, we want our check, and you're looking at it saying, well, you didn't allow QIA to march, but you certainly allowed, more than a handful of people to march under their slogans. What does the city have in store?
I've got to tell you, that is a nightmare scenario where QIA doesn't officially march in the parade, but then its supporters operate as droplets throughout. That is a real problem, and I can't really comment much more than that on the hypothetical, but clearly that would not be in the spirit of our understanding with Pride Parade and QIA, that their presence would not be seen at the parade.
Well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, James, and I want to thank you for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
And Robin, we're going to be talking about Kulanu. Robin knows what Kulanu is, and I want to let everybody out there know what it is as well. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back. It's an interesting topic, and it's too bad because Gay Pride Week and the Gay Pride Parade is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be summertime. The weather looks beautiful this weekend. It's Canada Day tomorrow, and we should be celebrating, and we shouldn't be worrying about these kind of groups that just want to spread hate. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Gila.
Thanks, Gila.
Hi, and welcome back. We're hateful groups marching at the Gay Pride Parade. And I'm here with Robin Shugar, who's a lawyer, and as well as a former candidate for Toronto District School Board Trustee. And Robin, we were talking a little bit during the break about the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and the reality is by having Queers Against Israeli Apartheid March, that really is not the spirit of what a public event in the City of Toronto is about. And it's unfortunate that we have to always spell these things out in a legal fashion, but that's the reality. It's ethics versus the legal system. And I don't know if you have an opinion on that. I mean, what would happen if Toronto City Council can't legally shut these kind of groups out of city-funded event? We don't want to stop funding groups. What else can be done?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, talking about the letter of the law and having a Pride Parade conduct themselves in the spirit in which it was intended. Pride Parade invites people to march and participate who celebrate values of Torontonians, values of Ontarians, values of Canadians. They don't invite people to come here and use Pride Parade as a platform to pursue other agendas. So anyone who is involved in Pride Parade really does have to adhere to the spirit of Pride Parade.
Well, especially since the spirit is to embrace a culture that suffered its own. It suffered its own negative attitudes, and to then use that as a platform, use their Gay Pride Parade as a platform to be hurtful to other groups, it's sad. It is sad, and it's not what it was meant to be.
And particularly, when you look at the group or the country or the people that this particular marginalized group is criticizing. It's a country that is a haven for gay and lesbians, and in 1989, I believe, homosexuality was decriminalized in Israel. Gay marriages are accepted now from abroad in Israel, and it goes on and on. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to live and to travel and to be a tourist when you're gay. And I think it's the only place in the Middle East, quite frankly, that one can feel safe in. But talking about the law, I mean, if things turn sour, as Councillor Pasternak fears they may, then one might decide to pursue this on a more of a provincial level or a criminal code level, and we really can't pursue it federally because the federal Human Rights Code is out of our jurisdiction. But from a provincial point of view, it can be pursued provincially through the Ontario Human Rights Code, and the focus would be how to I guess, describe what discrimination is. And I mean, in order to do that, you have to talk about when is it appropriate to use the messaging Israel apartheid and whether it contravenes the Human Rights Code. And that would have to go to the Human Rights Tribunal. They'd have to make a decision on whether or not that term contravenes Section 13, subsection 1. And what that section says is that it prohibits any notice or sign or banner that indicates the intention of the person
who feel what we should do is ignore. Completely ignore. Don't give them attention. Don't give them press. Of course, that's easier said than done. Don't give them a platform. Let them go with their hate-filled speech. Let them march and counteract it with positive things. There's a group called Hulanu. One of the organizers is Justine Apple, who is a very good spokeswoman. And she told me just a few days ago that they're having a float, an actual float, as opposed to just marching in the parade, this time with a band on the float and
that is terrific.
A lot of spirit, and maybe that's the better way, because the reality is that for every law that you can create, you have to take into account how much money it's going to cost. Money is a very
that's right.
A premium. The city doesn't have money to throw around. The province doesn't. Neither does the federal government. And to create these laws costs millions of dollars, and to enforce them costs millions more.
Although I have to say that Councillor Pasternak made it quite clear that bring it on, he said. If they want to strike a human rights code focus on that, then the city will fund the defense of that. But that's not what we're looking for. And you're right, there are other ways of handling it, and the positive way that Kulanu is discovered this year. I was at the Pride Parade last year, and they did have a large presence, but it's great to hear that they're having a float this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. On the other hand, as a citizen of Toronto, it's hard to ignore things like this when large corporations that I, as a citizen, am involved in. I mean, my involvement with the TD Bank, with Via Rail. I use Via Rail. People order from Pizza. I use Rogers.
These are present sponsors?
These are current sponsors of the Pride Parade, and also Bud Light, and I do drink beer. So and so do you. So it's hard to try to say, well, I'll just kind of back off when corporations that you're funding and you're supporting are not backing off. So I don't know if you have any opinion about that, but.
Well, I think that it is disappointing when corporations sponsor events that create so many hurt feelings in the city. But on the other hand, I don't like to see Israel being boycotted, and I don't think that it's a good reaction when we're not happy with the company to reverse that and to boycott as well. I think that's negative. I prefer the reward, the carrot to the stick, and maybe there are ways of embracing the fact that they're supporting the Gay Pride Parade. Maybe we could have that the Kulanu float is funded by one of these specific, corporations.
It's a great idea.
And have their name all over the Kulanu float, whereas everybody sort of turns a negative eye. Maybe we could go to news agencies and ask them to please not give attention to Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, and the crowd should just turn their back. Don't even look at them, don't take pictures of them, don't engage them. That's what they want. They want attention. It's just like a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum.
Right.
The best thing to do is to walk away and to turn your back. They're doing it for attention.
You know what? It's funny you say that. It's so true. Last year, I was at the event, and last year, I have to tell you, the presence from Kulanu and the presence from Israel supporters, gay Israelis and gay Israel supporters was 100 times larger and broader than the presence that QAIA had. And most people, I have to say, were focused on the positive effect that those people had, and those people brought to the parade. So it's really a great idea to kind of refocus our positive efforts onto the organizations that support the spirit of Pride Parade in Toronto.
And there's a group called Stop the Sponsorship of Hatred.
Yes,
and people can visit their website. So I want to mention that www.stopsponsoringhate.com, I believe. And there's a petition as well. And we're going to take a short break, and we're going to welcome Vivienne Ziner, and she's going to talk to us about the petition that she's drafted, asking the Toronto Dominion Bank to consider the feelings of the community when they're funding the Gay Pride Parade, and what she's asking them to do. Thanks for tuning in, and we're going to take a very short break this time. We had to fix a few technical glitches, and we'll see you in a minute or two. Thank you very much. Hi, and welcome back with my very special guest, Robin Shugar, is still joining us, and we have a new person on the scene, on the couch, as it were, Vivienne Ziner. Vivienne has drafted a petition, which she's going to read for us soon, and she's very involved with the group that we mentioned before.
Yes.
StopSponsoringTheHate.com, I believe.
I think it's Stop Sponsoring the Hatred.
It's actually,
Hatred.
it's at StopSponsoringHatred.com.
StopSponsoringHatred.com. So you can visit that. The organizer, I believe, is David Nitkin, and Vivienne has worked closely with David in drafting her petition. And do you know when that group Stop Sponsoring the Hatred, is that just this year in response, or was it also last year during Gay Pride?
This has been a very interesting late spring, early summer. What happened was Martin Gladstone, who is
the filmmaker,
he's a lawyer.
A lawyer.
He asked for people to get involved with him at City Council, at the Executive City Council, because the vote was about whether or not there were any hate laws or hate wording, if there was an infringement in terms of what...
He was hoping that the laws were stronger in the city.
Yes, and so the city council was taking a vote on how to proceed in terms of funding the Toronto Gay Pride Parade. So David Nitkin was there, I was there. I waited 6 hours to speak, which was, I mean, I was that committed. That wasn't the most interesting part. My husband sat there and waited with me. That was much.
That's true love.
That's
It's
true
my
love.
anniversary today, 26 years.
Muzzle.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. So, and while we were there, the incredible thing was to acknowledge and to see the kind of vitriolic hatred. And it wasn't couched in any terms. It was straight out, in your face, plain and simple anti-Semitism. It was, you know, in terms of anti-Israeli or the apartheid word, but it really was anti-Semitism. And it was pretty clear. And David stopped sponsoring the hatred at that point, and I started putting together a petition.
So when was this? Just a few months ago?
Not even, I think like a month ago.
Well, the website's been up for probably 4 months, and it's really an incredible website because it tracks all sorts of important statistics. For example, how much money people have withdrawn from TD Bank in protest. It tracks how many hits the website gets from every area of Ontario.
The name of the group, Stop Sponsoring Hatred?
Yes.
What's interesting about Stop Sponsoring Hatred is I couldn't remember exactly the wording, and there are groups to promote gay rights that are Stop Sponsoring the Hate.
And Stop the Hate.
Stop the Hate.
That's
the
why
one.
they couldn't get
Yeah,
that.
so they couldn't do Stop the
yes.
Hate. So it's just so interesting that you have gay rights, Stop the Hate, and then you have a group that's protesting the presence of what is clearly to a lot of people anti-Semitism couched in anti-Israel rhetoric. That it's interesting that they both have very similar names, that I'm Googling one and I'm finding the other. I wanted to ask Vivienne to read her petition, but I want to mention first that the Toronto Dominion Bank have they been willing to sit down with people? Because I know people have written letters to them asking for an explanation and haven't heard back, and we're quite disappointed.
Well, the real issue here, it is not just about not sponsoring the Toronto Pride Parade until after the parade has happened, to make sure that it doesn't get hijacked. The bigger issue for me is what I perceive and believe to be a lack of corporate responsibility. And I think that it is more than just being apathetical. I find it really very frightening. I'm a child of survivors, and as I understand what happened in Europe, people don't understand that it wasn't just that there was a Europe that was positive to Jews one day,
Right.
and negative to Jews in the other. It's
That was
done.
a slow process.
Well,
What about Toronto Dominion Bank and the other corporate sponsors? They're not the only corporate sponsor. Why is this petition only addressing Toronto Dominion Bank?
Well, I think from a very fundamental point of view, the idea for me that they're using my money to support, promote, allow, condone any kind of hate.
As opposed to other companies where you will just decide not to buy their product? Is that... well, why would you not, if you felt that strongly about Toronto Dominion Bank, why wouldn't you just change banks rather than start an online petition?
Well, here's the thing, and this is how I feel about this. If you are going to, if you're going to cook a frog, I don't know why anybody would cook a frog, but if you're going to cook a frog, you would never put a frog into boiling hot water. You would put a frog into cold water, and you would slowly turn the heat up. And that's how I see anti-Semitism or the acceptance of
I
it.
thought you were going to make a joke about frogs being green and Toronto Dominion Bank being green. And how I wanted to
That was
ask
for
you,
you.
I was waiting for the joke. I wanted to
Okay.
ask you to read the petition for us.
Okay.
And people can visit the petition. What's the website? We put it up on the screen actually.
www.petitiononline.com/indigo9/
/. Okay.
Yes.
So let's hear Vivienne's petition.
Okay.
It's short. It's short.
It is. It is. Stop TD Bank funding for the Toronto Pride Parade until after the parade has taken place to prevent QA, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, hijacking the Pride Parade again. To Toronto Dominion Bank, we the undersigned demand that the Toronto Dominion Bank immediately withdraw its funding for the Toronto Pride Parade until after the parade has taken place to ensure that the parade is not once again illegally hijacked by Queers Against Israeli Apartheid. The Executive Committee of the City of Toronto has mandated that the City of Toronto will only fund the parade after the Pride Parade has taken place for exactly this reason. QA are a hateful, discriminatory, and racist organization whose roots have been traced back to terrorist organizations, and their message of divisiveness, exclusionism, and hatred have no place in an event that is meant to celebrate diversity, acceptance, and tolerance. We demand that the Toronto Dominion Bank do so now, and that they inform the organizers of the Pride Parade and the citizens of Toronto of their decision to do so immediately.
So I'm going to comment two things, Vivienne.
Yes.
One is that you say that it's the illegal involvement of Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, and I think it's already been proven that it's not illegal, it's unethical, it's, I consider it immoral, but it's unethical and it's not representative of the city, but as of now, I don't think it is illegal according to the city, so I would address that. And the other is what was brought up previously when Councillor Pasternak was chatting with us, is that what if Queers Against Israeli Apartheid itself doesn't officially get involved, but all of a sudden we have Rainbow Group Against Israeli Apartheid or some other group that it's a lot of the same people and a lot of the same messaging, and Toronto Dominion Bank is still sponsoring. How can we address that in terms of your petition?
Well, I think I will have to amend my petition to say, and other groups involved in spreading hate. Yes, and focusing on Israel. And the other word that really just freaks me out is apartheid. My husband's South African, and he knows about apartheid. And apartheid is when you couldn't get on a bus or you couldn't go to a bathroom or...
Apartheid is when legally you could not. There were legal laws.
Yes.
There's a different set of laws
Yes.
for white people and black people in Africa. In Israel, it is one set of laws for everybody. There are Arab politicians. There are representatives in Israeli universities. The Arab population, in terms of their proportion, they are proportionally represented in the universities, in hospitals,
In Parliament.
and it is definitely not an apartheid state.
Absolutely.
But Gila, getting back to what you were asking Vivienne earlier about why are we singling out TD Bank? We ourselves, don't want to be singled out, and why are we singling out TD Bank? And I guess two things I can address, I can say to that question. And one is that you got to start somewhere. You have to pick your battles and then build from there. And the best place to build is with the biggest agitator. And TD Bank is the #1 largest private sector funder of Pride parades.
How much money do they give to the parade?
In total, they give approximately 5 to 6% of the parade's annual budget is given directly from TD Bank. Supporters of TD Bank, all Canadians in fact, because TD Bank does represent Canadian taxpayers, all Canadians deserve better leadership from their bank and more respect from their bank, especially the bank that holds their money and their investments. And also, banks such as this have a fiduciary responsibility, a moral and ethical responsibility to the people that they serve, to the country that they're functioning in, and this bank is failing in their responsibility. So, I mean, those two things coupled together make sense to me, make a lot of sense that we be focusing on this bank as opposed to the beer company, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I have an issue always with boycotting because I just feel that it's no place in a democratic society. We boycott them, they boycott us. That it's negative. I prefer something more positive coming out of it, which is that we, it's hard to say how we go about it, but more positive is to thank the other banks for not getting involved, I guess. But that's not realistic, and I understand that. But to me, more positive is if people just have a letter writing campaign, sending letters to Toronto Dominion Bank, not in a threatening fashion, not threatening to take their deposits or their mortgages elsewhere, more of trying to explain how hurtful this is, because I think that maybe that message isn't getting put across properly, and oftentimes what happens when you have boycotts or petitions and things like that, you make them dig in their heels and feel stronger about the issue as opposed to changing their mind. It'll be interesting to see how they respond. I support what you're trying to achieve, 150%, and it's just a question of how do we best go about it, and that's why we're all here today, and that's what I think this show is about, is trying to weave through all the different ideas and to try to find what's going to work, what can we all come away with. So I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And taking time. I know how busy everybody is. It's right before a long weekend. And I just want to mention that it's Canada Day tomorrow.
Yay!
It's Canada Day. And I think what's Canada about? Canada's about everybody. Doesn't matter your race, your religion, your gender, your sexuality. It's Canada Day is the day to celebrate one of the most diverse countries in the world. And we all want to be together, and we want to celebrate together. And I want to welcome Prince William and his new bride, who've landed in Ottawa today and are going to be touring our country. Not coming to Toronto, but they will be touring the country. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll have to meet again soon.